As far as the media is concerned, that this synod is supposed to be about two things: the issue of communion for the divorced and remarried, and the other is how we approach the whole question of gay people and gay unions. Now, I can tell you that on the second topic, the only time that arose last week in the synod interventions or speeches was in 1/3 of one delegate's speech, and that's one speech out of over 70. Okay, so it really has not had any attention at all, because as the Synod Fathers keep saying here, we're concerned here with how we bolster, the Christian family, right? Man, woman, and the extended family built on that. So I just don't think that issue has really come up. Now, the issue for communion, divorced and remarried is real, and I would say, is being discussed in the Synod, but so far in quite general terms, in terms of, the tension between truth and mercy and so on. I think the issue is real because one of the things that the Synod is facing up to, one of the new realities that the Church must face, is that people have gone into marriage for many years without a proper understanding of what it is, and therefore many people's marriages who have broken down were in fact invalid. Now, the Pope's accelerated annulment process is designed, of course, to deal with that, but many of the bishops here say, look, there are people here for whom the judicial path, the annulment path, is just not appropriate, and we would like the right as bishops to be able to admit on a case-by-case basis people to the sacraments where we have the moral certainty that marriage never existed. Now, does that touch on doctrine? No, because it's still upholding the principle of indissolubility. Does it touch on the doctrine of sacraments? No, because we are talking here about people who never had a valid marriage. So that's where the argument is happening, or the discussion is happening. My sense, and it is just a sense, is that the so-called Casper solution, that is to say, some kind of generalized pathway back to the sacraments, is not a runner in the Synod. I think it's a relatively few people who want that, but there are a sizable number of people here, of bishops here, who want to have the discussion about what to do in a very small number of cases where they believe that annulment for whatever reason is not appropriate or can't happen, but they believe that people should be readmitted. Now, that discussion, I think, is happening, and it is happening this week, but as a proportion of the total discussion, I would still say it's a relatively small matter. I mean, I can tell you what I think the big themes in this Synod are, if you want.
Sure, please. What are the big issues? And in keeping with that line of reasoning, are these big issues causing tensions within the Synod?
The Synod is full of tension and full of disagreement, which I personally think is a wonderful thing. I think we should celebrate the fact that we have a global church of phenomenal diversity, in which bishops are coming from very, very different situations: rich, poor, north, south, urban, rural, coming with incredibly different challenges. The Africans want to talk about the pastoral challenge of what happens when a polygamous man who has 5 wives converts to Catholicism. What do you do? Do you ask him to abandon his 4 wives to poverty? A discussion which, by the way, the Europeans and Latin Americans have no idea how to even go about begin discussing, and so on. So I think, of course there are differences, and there are also disagreements, because there are always disagreements between, as it were, teachers and pastors, those who believe that what the world needs is the church simply to reaffirm and be clear about what it teaches, and others who say, no, we have to dialogue with people and meet them where they are. Those tensions are implicit in our faith, in Christianity and in Catholicism, and I think those disagreements are very, very clear. The question is, are the disagreements so great that they amount to division? In other words, have people closed off themselves from listening to each other? No, my sense is that this is a very serene Synod. People are listening to each other. They're genuinely discerning. They're listening to each other and learning from each other. And I hear that the small groups are working extremely well. In fact, overall, the Synod is working extremely well. So what themes are emerging? I think I can certainly think that an important theme that's emerging is actually the idea that perhaps we don't have a one-size-fits-all global pastoral strategy, but maybe some of this needs to be actually determined at a more local level, which raises the whole question of local assemblies, synods, and so on at a regional level. And there have been some very, very interesting proposals in that regard. Apparently about 20 speeches have been on that, and a lot of discussion in favour of that. So I think that's one very clear trend. Another one is the need for proper preparation for marriage in the light of the collapse of law and culture support for marriage. Now, there's a lot of talk here about proper kind of 6-month, real formation, which involves catechesis and so on. Now, Liz, I know they've talked about this before, but if they really grasp this, and if at the end they say in this final synod document, Holy Father, we think we should not let people get married who have not undergone this process of proper formation, then I think that's a radical shift, because it means a lot of people won't get married in church because it'll be too much. The church won't, be saying to people, come and get married, we'll marry whoever. But they'll become much more selective about who they marry because they need the certainty that those marriages are valid. And one more thing I think is coming, so I think that could be a very substantial shift if they put in a very definite commitment. One other thing, language. There's a big theme here that we need a new language to speak to contemporary society. That some of the language that the church uses around marriage and family is too abstract, and a new language which actually embraces the reality of contemporary society is what's needed. So those are three trends I think that have clearly emerged from the Synod so far.